You can pipe your ChatGPT on the screen. Okay, so here's the deal, everyone. The the acoustic of the room is really bad. People over there at the registration, can I get your attention for a little bit? People over there to the right, people over there to the left. Here's what I would like to ask of you today. The acoustic of the room is kind of resonating. If you talk at all, it's going to interfere with the session. Obviously, I'm not asking you not to talk, but if you would like to have a chat during one of the sessions, please make sure you go to the kitchen area. Okay? Can I have a yes from everyone? Yes? Yes? Okay. No whispering, no chatting, except if you're asking the speaker question. Okay? Sounds good? All right. With that being said, let me start off today's session together. So first of all, welcome to AI Moonshot Meetup. My name is Tanwa Arpornthip. I am the technical advisor of SCB 10X. So today we have a very esteemed guest, but before we go to the guest, I would like to introduce Kun Anawut to talk a little bit about our DISTRICTX and the space that we are hosting this event in.
Thank you, Dr. Tanwa. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Moonshot Meetup. Today, we are here to explore the exciting world of large language models and their impact on the field of artificial intelligence. As many of you know, the breakthroughs in language models such as GPT-3 have revolutionized the way we understand and interact with natural language. The ability to process a vast amount of text data and generate human-like responses has opened up new possibilities for a range of applications, from language translation to conversation-based AI systems. Large language models like GPT-3 have also pushed the boundaries of what's possible in terms of generating high-quality content, from writing articles and composing music to generating code and even creating new scientific theories. So today, we are here to discuss the potential and challenges of large language models and how they are shaping the future of AI. Let's talk about the implications of these models for the fields of natural language processing and machine learning, and explore their impact on society and ethics. So let's dive in and discover the exciting world of large language models. Let's discuss and exchange ideas and be part of shaping the future of AI together. And luckily, I didn't have to write this myself. I actually used ChatGPT to write this opening speech, right? So I think this is something that we haven't been able to do in the past, year or so. Like last year, it would have been almost impossible to do this. So I'm thank you for AI for producing this text for me, and I hope this shows actually where the future is heading, right? So thank you everyone for joining, and hope this is a fruitful discussion.
Man, he stole your thunder. We were talking about us using that for the entire session. I guess that's not going to work anymore. Anyway, let's start off with our first guest, Dr.Sarana Nutanong, the Dean of School of Information Science and Technology at VISTEC, and the CEO and co-founder of VISAI. So please give him a welcome. All right, next we have Dipen Mehta, the General Manager in Financial Services for Asia Pacific of Microsoft. And lastly, we have joining us here online, Dr. Satya Nitta, the CEO and co-founder of Merlyn Mind. He's also the former global head of AI solutions at IBM. Can you hear us well, Dr. Satya?
Yes.
Okay, and we can hear you very well. All right, thank you. So again, just a reminder for those of you who just came in late, the acoustic of this room is very resonating. Please do not speak during the session. If you would like to have a chat with your friends, feel free to get out into the hallway or go into the kitchen. Okay. Also, food is in the pantry in case you're hungry during the session. So just like Kun O was saying, or ChatGPT was saying, just channeling it out from Kun O, ChatGPT is very dominating in the news article in the span of the past few months. This amazing AI technology has been around for a while. So how come people are just start to pay a lot more attention to ChatGPT and generative AI in like the most recent time? Like what happened there? Is there like a big innovation, or it's just that people get more exposure to AI? Let's start with Dr. Satya.
Good evening, everybody. That's a great question. We've been wondering that ourselves. So, I mean, if you look back at the last decade in AI, right, we've had IBM Watson win Jeopardy. We've had AlphaGo beat Lee Sedol in the World Go Championships. And we've had broadly GPT-3 that came out about a year ago that captured people's imagination. But what happened with ChatGPT was a little bit viral. Of course, along with ChatGPT, you had DALI and right and various generative AI based image translators that popped up as well. I think what as I think about this, I think what really happened is we went from a time when you could talk to Alexa or Siri through single shot commands, maybe have some chain dialogue, right? You can only really chain dialogue with Alexa when you're playing something like, 20 questions or something. And even there, you can only kind of speak in restrictive phrases. You're not really, talking to these things in very natural language. And so people went from a world where you could basically do limited numbers of things with a computer to ChatGPT, where you're seemingly conversing in very fluid, very natural colloquial language and having multiple turns and having a long dialogue session and going back and referencing something and disagreeing with it. And it's pulling up all kinds of information. It's composing poems like Neruda. It's creating code. And that captured people's imagination. And some of it has to go back to people thinking, okay, I can now basically see the future where I might be able to speak to a robot and ask it to wash my dishes, right? It's essentially allowing people to bridge the gap between Chat GPT and the world of tomorrow, because the ability for a machine to understand very human-like language and perform commands like creating images or creating essays, poetry, summarizing things, right? This really bridged the gap for people in a way that say Alexa, Siri, Watson, right, AlphaGo never did. But in reality, this didn't come out of nowhere. It was built on top of a series of innovations that have happened over the last 25 years in AI. And this was an example of brilliant engineering, putting it all together and kind of reaching the tipping point. So that's kind of my perspective.
Okay, Dipen, we would love to hear from you as well. Like, what happened? Why all of a sudden ChatGPT is everywhere?
Yeah, I think just building on what my colleague said, I think it was the natural. It's literally that we're talking to another human, right? So it's a natural interaction, talking to technology and actually blurring the line between what is technology and what is a human conversation. So I think that was ultimately what I think led to the hype behind it. Obviously, from building on the advancements from an AI perspective, I think obviously if you'd like to break through, but I would call it more evolution rather than complete kind of revolution, was really this idea of going from very singular task-oriented models to having one that's kind of multitask-oriented and more generalized in that sense. And so once you paired that with the ability to talk to it like a human, and I came from Amazon, so I was laughing at your Alexa example, by the way. I spent a lot of time in that space as well. I think that's ultimately what's captured the hearts and minds. It's really just kind of almost, what's the right word? It's dumbed it down in a way, in the sense that it's accessible to everyone. And I think that's the main piece. I would say from a more technical perspective, I would argue that maybe some of the breakthroughs are obviously just the sheer size of data that these models are being trained on, and in particular GPT-3 and potentially whatever GPT-4 is going to be looking like. But if you look at ChatGPT alone, I think it's almost a remarkable outcome of what's come out, the capabilities that have come out of this model based on so much data. I think we wouldn't have been able to imagine that before, and being able to run that, you train that model against so much data has allowed us to really see almost the art of possible now. Obviously, then there's things around that's quite generalized, and where we're going to go when we start kind of fine tuning that into more specialized use cases. So that's pretty exciting. I think for certainly as people are looking to adopt the technology and actually build on it, there's going to be a lot of excitement coming forward, and we'll touch on that in a second. And then, I think last is just really performance, right? The whole performance of this thing is remarkably accurate, surprisingly, and not being trained on any particular data set. So.
And the next question, I'm going to throw it to Dr. Sarana. Like, I totally agree with both of you that ChatGPT captures the hearts and minds because of the closeness to the human interaction that we used to and the utility that you get out of using it. So as a company that's trying to do AI enablement for business, obviously the later versions of AI models, they are huge models, right? There's a lot of costs and development and operating costs that go into using it. So as a company that relying on large language models or big AI to power your business, like what are the benefits and drawbacks from using this kind of huge model that's, a normal startup wouldn't be able to develop by themselves?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question, and that's why I came prepared. But I wrote this answer myself. Okay, so yeah, the two different aspects I look at this, all right, as a researcher and as a business person. As a researcher is very exciting. It's extremely interesting that we have big companies doing big things, pushing the boundary. Like when we look at language modeling, all right, we look at it as a scientific problem, and a lot of times in science, you want to kind of like remove one constraint and see what fantastic stuff you can do, right? In terms of large language models, the constraint that you remove is the number of parameters or the model size. Okay, and of course, what ChatGPT has achieved is very, very impressive. All right, you have a language model that's also a database, and they can do like reinforcement learning as well. So that's really cool. Okay, now as a business person, as a CEO of VISAI, I think that we need to put that constraint back on. If you want this language model, right? You want this kind of language model to be beneficial to a country like Thailand, where we cannot afford compute power at the same scale as all these countries. Okay, so to answer your question, right? We should not rely on these prominent players to build language models for us, because whatever they build is going to fit the market. Okay, it's not going to fit Thailand, right? So yeah, so how but basically the global AI community is pretty open, right? That companies like Microsoft, like Google, when they have their inventions, when they build new model, they'll also release their open source versions as well. And as an academic, right, I'm very grateful, okay, that we also have that option, so that we can take those technologies and kind of build our own stuff. Let me ask you one quick question, right? Has anyone used ChatGPT in Thai yet? Okay, in comparison to English, is it like same speed or much slower or what? Do you know why? You see input encoding, all right? In Thai, it's done at a character level, but in English, it's done at almost a word level. This is one of the reasons why we can't rely on other countries to build models for us. This is some technical issue that can be fixed very, very quickly. Okay, if you have the code, if you have the source code, we can fix that in a day and a half. All right, so yeah, we want to take control of the technology, right? And to close out the answer to this question, right, I think we should definitely join the global game and be more deliberate on responding to our local needs and take control.
Okay, gotcha. So the benefits of using LLM for a business would be that an LLM would open up the utilities of your business. But at the same time, the drawback is that the model that you use might not be the most suitable model for the market that you're trying to attack. Right. So that would go to you next, Dipen. As a big player in AI, for those of you who don't know, Microsoft invested in OpenAI and ChatGPT and all of that. So you are definitely considered a big player in this space. So there is a concern about having the power of this foundation model being centralized in a big player's hand, such as you. So from his Dr. Sarana's suggestion is that one of the way that our smaller players can disrupt the bigger player is to go for the niche market, go for the smaller market that you are not attacking. But is there any other way that the smaller players can compete with people like you or like Google or Amazon? Like what is that space?
Yeah. So I think I would argue, obviously, as a vendor in the room, and obviously a big investor in OpenAI, is that it's unfair to say that we're trying to control the technology. If anything, actually, the reason why Microsoft's invested in OpenAI is that we actually want to deploy those models onto our platform to allow others to then consume. And so I think when you think about the power being in the big companies, it may be true for some other technology vendors who have built their own models and then are protecting them. Obviously, not everything is open source yet in OpenAI for various reasons, but as we get there, the idea here is all of that training, all of the mass compute power required for training the model is then marginalized in the sense that you can reuse all of our investment. So actually, our view is that it's democratizing the power of this AI by actually kind of exposing the investment through our platform and through our APIs to allow a smaller company to then fine-tune the model to a specific need. The Thai language one's a really interesting one to take offline, but I think when you look at for specific, let's say, business use cases or processes, particularly if you're starting an AI-based company, why wouldn't you take the power of this model, fine-tune it to a specific use case, and potentially even build around it in terms of workflows for making an end-to-end solution? And then you have the power of that outcome. And from a business perspective, that's actually what you're building, right? So in a way, yes, it can be seen as a detriment that only the big players, and particularly in the case of cloud providers, they have the infrastructure to really do a lot of this training. But if we're exposing the trained models to allow you to then fine-tune them, actually what we've done is we've just taken away all the heavy lifting. That isn't necessarily, except for some edge cases, it's going to become undifferentiated heavy lifting in terms of the core language model. And then you can then fine-tune it against your specific data sets to meet a particular need.
I love that answer because on the one hand, a smaller player that have expertise in AI can develop the AI model that can compete with Microsoft on edge cases. But at the same time, if you are just AI builders who want to start an AI-powered business, like he said, the heavy lifting of training the model has been commoditized by people like Microsoft. And in fact, Microsoft is putting OpenAI on, or ChatGPT at least, on Azure, right?
So just to build on that, so for those who aren't familiar with OpenAI more broadly, it's not just ChatGPT, right? So there's quite a lot of other models and large language models. It's going to be large vision models as well. And so there are actually sort of 4 models that we've kind of co-invested with OpenAI on. The first one is obviously GPT as a broad-based language model, and GPT-3 in this instance, and potentially as we go forward in our partnership. The other one is DALL-E, right? So this is a vision model, right, that takes natural language input and then generates images off the back end of that, which is, if you haven't played with it, it's wildly exciting and scary at the same time, I would say. And then the third one is called Codex. And so this one is a really powerful one, particularly for people who might want to enter into the space and aren't hardcore developers. Codex is obviously the ability to take natural language and then develop code or produce code on the back end. And so we've obviously taken that technology and implemented it into some of our properties like GitHub, which is a technology platform that we own, and something called Copilot. So you can actually have paired programming in a way through AI, right? And so again, it's about really empowering the developer to start focusing more on that kind of core algorithm or logic that you're trying to build, and let Copilot look at, are you writing insecure code, or, you're going to run into this problem, and all these sort of pieces that it can kind of infer. And then the last is ChatGPT, right? And so that's obviously the newest, and we're going through where that's going to go. But I would add that I think when you look at it from Microsoft's perspective, we're not in the business of actually building kind of those AI outcomes. All right. So yes, we will use this technology where we see it applicable, like I talked about here with GitHub and Copilot, and you'll see it in Microsoft Office, right? The ability to generate text, let's say in Word, or emails and Outlook. Of course, those are areas where we're going to invest, and we're going to use the same technology, by the way, that's being deployed through our OpenAI stack on Azure. But ultimately, we're not trying to build these outcomes. We're actually trying to enable others to do more with what we have. So it's not about competing with us. In fact, it's actually about partnering with us.
I think that's even more amazing because smaller players with AI expertise can develop their own model. Smaller players that don't want to develop their own models can build applications on top of existing model. So to me, when I look at this, I see it in parallel with cloud computing. Because back in the day, everyone set up servers, right? Everyone has to set up servers. And then cloud computing happened, is commoditized. So if you want to build a website, you can just use cloud computing service. But at the same time, if you are a smaller player with like specific need and you have the expertise to do it, you don't need to use cloud computing. You can just go ahead and build that AI model yourself, right? So I think it's fascinating and enabling a lot of use cases that comes out of both the large models and the specific use case model. Speaking of use cases for an AI model, Dr. Satya, it's going to be interesting to you. So, okay, AI will enable a lot of application use cases. A question that typically comes up from a founder is that, well, what am I building with an AI? Right? That's always going to be a question. And Merlyn Mind specifically is building something AI-powered education. Right? I would love for you to tell us a little bit more about what was your process in narrowing down the market down to education AI. Like of all the problems that LLM could tackle, why do you pick to attack this one?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Thank you. I want to build on my colleague's response, right? Dipen's response. I think we see the AI landscape the same way, which is, what I don't think the big technology providers are super interested in doing, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Dipen, is going and building all the domain-specific instantiations of AI. In some cases, they're applications. In some cases, they're broader, they're deeper than applications, right? In fact, the way we see it as well is these large language models are broadly built for general purpose capabilities, but you have to fine tune them for domain specific applications, right? And the world is very large, and so even though Microsoft, Google, etc., are huge companies, the way AI will eventually proliferate and fill the whole world is through a number of companies like us who build on top of the platforms that the big tech providers will create. And an additional interesting point about AI, and before I jump into how we picked education and the particular use cases, so an additional interesting point about this whole field is virtually everything's published, everything's open source. It's really about compute power, data, and training, right? All the algorithms are pretty well known, and it's about cloud architectures. But even the size of the models is shrinking. Things like transfer learning are coming in. People are beginning to use, various compression techniques to collapse the size of the models, right? Reduce the footprint, etc., which starts to make even the core technology accessible to smaller players and eventually to academics, right? So leaving aside all that, so coming back to kind of an application domain like education, why large language models here? So we've always my our particular company, again, we come out of IBM Research. I spent 18 years there, and when we founded Merlyn Mind about 5 years ago, we basically were broadly interested in taking AI and applying it to domains where we could actually impact humanity. So we weren't especially interested in going after domains like defense, but we were super interested in domains like education and healthcare, and places where AI could have a very large beneficial effect, and where broadly, when I look at a field like education and teaching and learning, etc., these aren't places where failures are necessarily going to have very bad outcomes. And by failures, I mean an AI algorithm, these are all stochastic machines. If it goes wrong 3, 4, 5% of the time, it's not necessarily dramatically bad for you, right? So what we are focusing on is specifically, right? The way we look at AI, right? AI really can't do things that people do really well, right? So if you look at a teacher broadly or a professor, their job primarily is not just to impart wisdom and knowledge to you, but also to fill you with motivation, do all the human things that people do so well, right? The best teachers are role models. We look at them, right? We remember them for a very long time, right? Even as late into my career as now, I still remember the best teachers I've had, right? And and so these are things humans do really, really well. If a student is struggling, a human will, right? A human teacher will basically say, right? They'll use metaphors, analogies, a shared background understanding of the world to communicate to them, right? All of these are well beyond, right, the ability of a computer to do, to understand human affect and right, and so on, right? Whether you're ready to learn, whether a particular analogy is landing on you, right, or maybe I'll switch seamlessly into something else. These are very difficult for a computer to do, right? And whereas a human does it effortlessly. But there are some things that people do, right? Like grading papers, right? Creating assessments that are very laborious, but these are things a computer can do pretty well, right? So when we pick an application domain to go after, what we're trying to figure out is what is the computer really good at, right? That a human might be reasonable at, but the computer can do this really well at scale, and save a human a lot of right hassle, and leave the human to do the human things that they can only uniquely do, right? So they can focus on them and elevate their level of productivity, their level of consciousness at some level, if you will, right? So we are picking problems which are well within the wheelhouse of computing, where computers are basically being positioned to reduce the mundane workloads from humans, and the human is then left to basically do the human things really well. So an example is we are basically building using things like right, GPT-3 and T5, and building our own transformers to do things like question generation. So professors, teachers, in the course of their teaching, they rely on right, the assessments quite a bit. So for instance, I'm teaching, I want to insert a question in halfway through the class or give a small pop quiz to the class, right? But this quiz is very topical. It's derived from my own source material. It's not something that I just grabbed from some random textbook, right? It comes from the textbook I'm teaching from, or the PowerPoint slides that I showed the class over the past few semesters or the past few weeks, right? So rather than having a professor or a teacher spend a lot of time creating questions, could we basically get a computer to do it? Right? These are the kinds of things that we're super interested in. Similarly, right, when students respond to these kinds of questions, if it's a short answer, could a computer score? Right? And this is where some of the fascinating advances with large language models and their ability to, right, because of sentence embeddings, their ability to understand, parse, and summarize and create comes in super handy for us, right? It's a great example of an application domain where we have to train it on topical data. We have to tune it to the specific instance. We have to localize it to the context of teaching and learning. And it's the kind of thing that companies like us are super interested in doing. Companies like Google and Microsoft less interested. They're more interested in being the broad application providers, and that's kind of how AI will proliferate in the world. And that's kind of how we see the lay of the land.
I love that. I love that answer. Because the first thing you mentioned wasn't like we picked this because the AI is good at it. You started with saying we picked education because we're passionate about it. And one thing that I have always found from founders is that they be like, oh, we have AI now. What can we build? And I always say, no, 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 no. Go back to and see what technology can solve your problem. But let's go back to the model part a little bit. Like you were talking earlier about localizing AI models for specific use cases or specific regions. If someone wants to attack that problem, because smaller players, as you said, have an edge there, like what are the processes there? Like what is it that we have to consider? What are the limitations?
First of all, when I hear about these like advanced NLP applications that are achievable in English, in Chinese, or in Japanese, all right, I listen to it with a great envy, right? Because we don't have the same kind of luxury in Thai yet at this moment. There is quite a lot for us to catch up, okay, and this is quite problematic if there is someone who want to follow the passion and build advanced NLP applications. All right, let me give you an example, okay? Like in English, let's say that you want to build like a meeting summary model, okay? Like where it reads the meeting minutes and get the key point and summarize in 1 or 2 sentences. These are the things, right? If you want to do that in English, you find a text-to-text model and you fine tune it. You can do it in a short period of time, all right? Could be like a weekend project if you already have the data, okay? But in Thai, all right, we don't have that luxury yet, okay? So of course, right, if you really want to build it, you can still do it, but the cost of developing a supervised machine learning model from scratch is really high. Okay, so this is something that we need to catch up a lot with. But on a more positive note, all right, I have to say that there are also like new up and coming open source initiatives in Thai, right? Have you heard of Thai NLP? Okay, this is one of the projects that we are trying to build like a toolkit. All right, that's like something similar to NLTK in other languages. So this is probably one of the things that we want to look at, all right, in order to catch up. And a bit of plug, right? My research group, okay, we also built a language model called Wangchan Bertha, okay, which is something that we also released on Thai NLP as well. So yeah, at this point we are at this level, all right, but we're gonna move forward a lot quicker if we have more effort put in at the foundation model level.
Thank you. So we have talked about the immersion of AI model and how do we apply the application. So I want to take the conversation from the past and the present to the future a little bit. So let's start with the near future. And Dipen, let's start with the near future. What is your vision of what is going to happen in the next few years, just short future? What is the current barrier to innovation, and what kind of breakthrough do we need so that we can unlock further growth in AI model?
Okay, multi-part question. I guess first I would say
I'm a college professor. I'm sorry.
I need
the education AI.
So I would say, first off, I think let's talk about the breakthroughs. I think in many ways this is a bit subjective, but I think the breakthroughs already happened, right? I think we talk about what we're doing now with these LLMs as kind of hype cycle, but it's actually just the beginning. We really don't know where this is going to go. So I think this is actually the breakthroughs happened, and we're just at the beginning of it. So over the next 2 to 3 years, we're just going to see how this evolves even more, right? So there's a race for number of parameters. There's a race for the data sets, the size of the data sets. And then there'll be a race for fine tuning them, right? To specific domain, specific outcomes. So I think the breakthrough has already happened. I would say in terms of where the opportunities are is these are, by definition, as an AGI, as a generalized AI, it doesn't actually solve for a particular outcome. And so I think what we're going to see a lot of, I would say, kind of maybe in a hypercycle sort of way really soon, is a bunch of people trying to find the kind of the hammer looking for a nail, as people say, right? So what can they use this for? And I think what we're going to see is what do you do with the outcomes of these models? So if you give an example, you can point ChatGPT to summarize, let's say, 100 blog posts. And 30 are positives. You can do sentiment analysis. 30 are positive, 30 are negative, maybe 30 are neutral, or somewhere around there. What do you do with that information, right? So today it's a textual outcome. You can then get it programmatically in JSON or some other kind of machine readable format. But what are you going to do with it? And so I think that's where we're going to see quite a lot of rapid innovation off the back of this. Is really going to be how are people trying to consume this, and then tie it into an end-to-end process. And similar to what we talked about earlier, the opportunity is for smaller players, if you want to use that terminology, to start thinking about where that is. And then can they partner with somebody who's already doing an end-to-end process, or do they want to start a business that's around the end-to-end process? And so I think those are kind of, where we are in terms of the kind of the breakthrough, and then what we're going to see in the short term.
Gotcha. So I'm going to throw similar questions to both Dr. Sarana and Satya. Dr. Satya here. Let's start with Dr. Satya. Let's say you are a founder that wants to use an AI in your business, but you found out that the current AI model is actually not powerful enough. Not the open AI, not like any other AIs. Like the largest model doesn't even serve your purpose. As an application developer, so the top layer that's user facing, what can you do? Like, are you just stuck waiting for better AI model, or is there something that you can do from the application side so that to make your life easier?
Well, that's a pretty open-ended question.
It is.
So, yeah. I mean, look, you can take it any number of directions, right? It depends on the kind of application maker you are, right? So, for instance, if you're simply putting a thin skin on top of
Can I make the
GPT.
question more concrete then? Let's say you
Please,
are
yeah,
starting Merlyn Mind today, and you look at
yeah.
all the AI models out there, and you're like, this is not going to cut it, but you still want to do AI assisted education company. Like, what could you do from the application side that would make your company grow?
Yeah, no, sure, right. I mean, it's basically right. It just comes down to the type of company you are, right? So if you're simply, so I'll use a couple of examples, right? And not necessarily in education, but I could use education examples as well, right? So one example is I mentioned question generation recently, right? So in fact, Dipen, part of what we're building is an AI assistant similar to Alexa, but domain specific, right? For the education industry. Right? But broadly, question generation is an example of an LLM, output that we're super interested in, right? So what we have found, just to give you to answer the question very concretely, there are other people trying to do question generation. Okay, for the most part, these are small application development shops that hit ChatGPT or GPT-3 in most cases, and basically give it a prompt and say, okay, so if I'm an application developer who rocks up and says, I want to build a company based on question generation, I'm pretty much stuck, right? It's good 50% of the time. It doesn't give me great distractors. Distractors are, let's say I generate a multiple choice question. There's the right answer. There are three other answers that are not right, but that are plausible. They have to be plausibly right for a good multiple choice question, right? So we looked at that problem. It was a fascinating problem, right? And we said, okay, because we have AI smarts and we have a quarter of our company is AI PhDs, we basically said, okay, classic example of a domain specific deep problem that requires us to go build with, right? We start with T5, we basically tune T5, then we say we need to actually go and build our own transformers to, right, answer the question, generate distractors, create an ensemble solution that actually goes from the machine being 50% right to about 85-90% right, at which point it's actually usable for professors like you, right? If you're basically saying, okay, I want to generate questions and half of the computer output is garbage, you're not going to use this very much, right? But if most of it is pretty good, I can use it as it is, right? With a few tweaks here and there, then you'll adopt it and embrace it, right? So it depends on the kind of company you are. If all you're doing is hitting an API, you're basically limited to what the core technology can do. If on the other hand you say, okay, I know what it can do, I know what the core technology can do, I know what the large language models in general are capable of. I have the ability to go in and tweak and tune and create ensemble methods and right, to stitch a few things together. Then you can actually extend well beyond, right, what the core technology itself out of the box provides, right? And that's solution development. But broadly, just to answer the question in a more generic way, what I've always been a huge believer in, right, is really understanding the limits of the technology. So even after you put all these various pieces of the puzzle together, there are things AI cannot do, right? AI can't tutor, and we can have disagreements about this. I don't believe we're at a point where we can have AI driving a car, or we should have AI driving a car, right? It's an example of a mission critical application where AI getting it wrong will kill a lot of people, right? So as a founder, right, and as a startup, we are super interested in working within the limitations of AI and doing something super imaginative with it, as opposed to starting a company and imagining a capability that doesn't exist, because that's not a path to success.
That's very insightful. Start a company knowing the limitation of the things that you want to use, right? And if you want more insightful information like that, follow SCB10X on social media. I mean, gotta click like and subscribe somehow. I heard it works. Let's throw the same question to Dr. Sarana. Like if you start an AI powered company today, but you find out that an AI model doesn't really seem kind of work for what you want to do, like what would you do?
I I would build a company that's very specialized in transfer learning, and that's pretty much what we did last year. Okay.
So define transfer learning for us.
The most attractive aspect of deep learning and large language models, right, is that you have the ability, okay, to take an existing model and adapt it to your data set. All right. So you can perform the same task, but in a different domain. Okay. If you can do transfer learning efficiently, then you can save a lot of data annotation effort. So that's deep learning in general. All right. One great thing about these large language models or foundations model is that not only the domain that you can adapt the existing model to, you can adapt it to different tasks as well. Okay, so if I were to start a company, but I just did start a company last year. It would be like we would really utilize these large language models or foundation models as a base for a lot of NLP tasks in a lot of domains, so that our customers, all right, don't have to do a lot of data annotation themselves. Okay, and they can have an AI model of their own. Yep.
And you know that advice works because he started a company. Right? He put it in practice. All right, I want to move from the near future to like really far future. So I'm gonna throw this question to everyone. Let's start with Dr. Satya. So in the far future, what kind of opportunities or trends should we be looking for? Should we be looking forward to have? And I'm not just talking about from technology perspective. Like what are the trends that you think are important to keep an eye out for? AI adoption, AI acceptance, AI ethics, commercialization of AI. Anything that you think we should really look for as an AI builder?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'll give a perspective, and then I'll put my colleague Dipen on the spot a little bit here. So Dipen, are you guys working on passing the Turing test?
Oh.
So
Would you like to call a helper? Phone home.
well, I mean, so Deepan, maybe you can answer in a couple of minutes, but I'll give you my perspective of what I suspect, could happen. But I'll also, caveat it a little bit. So a couple of things that have been super surprising to us in the field has been the success of deep learning, right? We've been in the field a long time, and when deep learning first came out, people said, okay, these are really interesting, and then they said they'll plateau at some point, and it doesn't seem to be plateauing. In fact, if anything, the ability of machines to do remarkable things like what GPT-3 and ChatGPT have just shown as examples, or DALI, has been stunning, right? We are very interested in a class of AI, right? In a class of transformers called action transformers, which we think will have amazing consequences for the world, right? For instance, what are action transformers? Broadly, taking natural language and performing some action, either in the virtual world or in the physical world, right? In the virtual world, I'm basically controlling my browser, say opening new tabs, or playing videos, or so on, right? And we think there's some pretty significant ramifications for this. For instance, if I just say, let's focus on computing and the user interface, right? Evolution of the user interface doesn't happen very often, right? The last one that's significant is touch computing came along, and it's been broadly very transformative. Voice has been along before touch, right? Alexa gave the whole field a big fillip, but voice has not broadly been as transformative as touch computing, right? We suspect that natural language interfaces, right? I'm going to be talking to my computer and doing things like booking flights, or shopping for things in totally different ways, because the ability for AI or action transformers to perform actions for you will change how I interface with computing. So, as an example, I'd like to say, book me a flight to Bangkok. I want to leave tomorrow night. I want to come back a week from now, right? I want to fly in an aisle seat, so I'll just give some natural language commands, and the thing will just come back and give me a few choices, as opposed to me pulling down menus, clicking things, searching, refreshing a session and starting all over again. There's a ton of friction associated with using computing now with mouse and keyboard and so on, right? Now, action transformers are also interesting because it's not restricted to controlling just a virtual machine like a computer. I could also control robots with action transformers, right? So there's some pretty interesting implications, and it's very hard to predict where things go, because really this whole field is evolving super rapidly, one, and two, several fields are evolving at the same time, and so the nonlinear effects come in, and so you'd be really foolish to hazard a guess like something will happen in 5 years or 10 years. And as an example, back in 1957, at the Dartmouth Conference of AI, where in fact the term AI was coined by John McCarthy, right? If you were to ask those early founders, and they used to say, McCarthy, Minsky, Simon Newell, they all used to say, you'd ask them, why would you build an intelligent computer? And they'd say, well, I want a computer to tell jokes and to teach people. And they made this bold prediction in 1957 that within 10 years, a computer will beat the world chess champion, right? They were actually wrong. It took 40 years to get there, right? But they were right directionally in that computing was evolving to do certain things, right? So they couldn't get it right. There's zero chance that any prediction that say I'll make will be right. So I want to just paint it with a broad brush and say, it's a fascinating field. Things are evolving very rapidly, non-linear effects, multiple things developing. At the same time as the algorithms, you still have brand new chip architectures that are coming out, analog AI is coming out, which is reducing the footprint for how much power you consume, how quickly you can train, there's application domains are evolving. So if you put it all together, we're in for a fascinating decade. We'll have to strap in, and maybe our colleague Dipen will tell us when the Turing test will be passed and whether it's actually even meaningful for the Turing test to be passed.
Okay, thank you. I love how you say that predicting time frame is almost impossible to do, but predicting the direction of it is fascinating, right? Multimodal communications with AI model is with AI application in general is also fascinating. How come we only have touch and type, and voice is really underdeveloped? What about like other way of communicating with it? I love that. Actually, I'm gonna let Dipen steep on like the Turing test question a little bit. Jump over you to Dr. Sarana, so you have more time to come up with the answer for that one. Dr. Sarana, same question. Like in the far future, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, what directional opportunity are you looking forward to have?
Yeah, first of all, we want to solve the foundation model problem, right? Probably within 3 years.
Define foundation model problem, because we do have foundation model now. Okay.
Like we also need like a more complete pipeline. All right, like is the transfer learning pipeline that I talked about earlier. Okay, we should have foundation models, right? Or these Roberta or BERT-based sort of model, BART, right? Sequence to sequence model, or GPT. Okay, that's also one of them we're looking at. So in the first year, all right, starting from this year, we will build these foundations first, and then we'll also support the transfer learning pipeline. Okay, so that it can be adapted to different domains, to different tasks. Assume that we have solved these problems within 5 years or within 3 years. Okay, another thread that we are working on is machine learning operations. Okay, so we are looking at machine learning problem as a software system problem. All right, we look at how we continue to develop machine learning model, test it, deploy it. All right, monitor, look at the data distribution, update the model when we need to. This sort of thing is kind of like it's kind of underrated. I have to say that
the non-sexy part of AI.
Yeah, the non-sexy part, but it's extremely impactful. Okay, and this is going to be something that's going to help us utilize the foundation models a lot easier. All right, like when you can test, when you can develop your transferred model faster. Okay, so I would say that like within a time frame of 5 years, I want Thailand to be very mature in terms of machine learning operations. Okay, and after that, I don't dare to predict.
Okay, thank you very much, Dipen. We're gonna come back to you. So same question. Directionally, what are you excited about in the next 5 to 10 years? And also Turing tests.
Yeah, so I was hoping to pull out my phone and ask ChatGPT what the answer to that would be, but instead I've decided I'll answer it like any other human would be and answer around the question, and hopefully you'll get to the answer you're hoping for. I would say instead of talking about the opportunities, I'd love to talk a little bit about where the challenges are.
Let's do that.
I think that would be just as a counterpoint to what we just heard. So first and foremost, I think when you think about Microsoft's position in this is fundamentally about responsible AI. Right. So one of the reasons why there's a commercial reason why we've obviously invested in OpenAI, that's a known outcome. But the way we deploy OpenAI is we wrap OpenAI in our APIs. And the reason we're doing that is across a number of dimensions. Obviously, first is to make it large scale and enterprise grade so that people can build businesses off the back of it. As you have tried probably ChatGPT today, although it does run on Azure, it's not designed for large scale consumption, and therefore it's always busy. So that's obviously the first piece. The second piece is all about then, again, from an enterprise perspective, is making it, role-based and access control and all the security around that, which is obviously baked in. But then the most important part is our responsible AI framework that sits on top. So we actually proxy every request through our own framework around responsible AI. And so I think when you think about the challenges going forward, or the opportunity in one sense of that challenge, is going to be how we're going to govern training data, how we're going to govern the outcomes of these models, right? So large, training data sets, the bias that can occur from that, just basically unwanted effects of what are come out of these large language models. And so our positions all pretty much around how can we make this much more responsible way of consuming AI. And so from a Turing test perspective, you would argue what is the valid outcome in trying to prove that? Because actually that leads you very much into a very gray area about what is responsible. And to your point, Dr. Satya, around should AI drive cars and so on and so forth, right? So we have spent an enormous amount of investment in not just defining what our views of a responsible AI are, but also then creating the kind of the governance policies and then the tooling on top, right? And so I think the long-term opportunity is going to be other organizations and maybe other startups that are creating governance frameworks for data, for generating training data or consuming others' data for training. I think that's going to be a really interesting space. And then we were just talking about, I didn't want to miss what we were talking about before we started, which was the perception of AI. I think that's going to be the massive challenge, right? And there's probably twofold, right? And I'm with Merlyn, it's impressive to hear about what the project is itself, but we were talking about learning, right? And if you look at with even in the short amount of time, the amount of impact ChatGPT has made in the education kind of community is bad in one way, but it's strikingly interesting as well. So you may know, for example, the New York Board of Education has obviously tried to ban ChatGPT from the schools, although, you know, like many educators, I'm not sure how that solves the problem because people use their phone and log in from home or use a VPN. But so they've done that, right? Obviously, OpenAI just recently released an AI detector, right? To kind of thwart that off. And I think that the big challenge or the opportunity, again, let's say from an education perspective, is this isn't going to replace education. This is going to allow us to think about how we should be teaching, right? And I think we were talking about prompts, and it's really all about how do you generate the correct prompts. And there's a lot of money in it as a prompt developer. But should we be teaching how to ask the questions, how to write the prompts rather than what is the answer, right? And I think that's going to be a really interesting space in education. And it's maybe near term now from the hype cycle, but it's really going to be a challenge globally because people have to really rethink the way they're going to run education. And then I'll take it to the more commercial side in terms of, if I look at things like Codex or even, our own products like a GitHub Copilot, then there's the view that my job is going to be taken away if I'm a developer, right? And again, that's going to change how we think about what a programmer or a software developer is doing for a living, right? And is it worried about kind of the framework of the code, the security of the code, and kind of how it's managed, or is it about what the outcome is you're trying to drive? And again, so we have to start teaching software development in a slightly different way, but I guess it kind of relates back to education in that sense as well. But I think that's going to be the really interesting challenges ahead. And that's not just 1, 2, 3 years. That's going to be ongoing for 5 to 10, easy.
I love all the answers. So one of the things that I hear from all three of you is that none of you mentioned that you're looking forward for more technological breakthrough, right? Dr. Satya is looking for more ways of communicating with the AI. Dr. Sarana is looking for more tooling for AI developers. And Dipen is looking for basically responsible usage of AI, how to change the culture, how to change the way we think about AI and using the AI responsibly. So as AI builders or, aspiring AI builders in this room, take that, like the experts in the field, they're not looking for more technological evolution. They're looking for more development surrounding the evolution that we already have, right? And if you're looking to build in the AI space, SCB 10X is recruiting. I mean, it's coming, right? So SCB 10X is recruiting. We're building aiming to build huge AI team. So if you're interested, come talk to me or our CEO, VISAI, sitting over here in the front row. Okay. Also, you can follow SCB 10X for crazy good material or content like we just have on social media. We on Facebook, SCB 10X. We on Twitter, SCB 10X_official. We on LinkedIn, right? Or connect with us after this event. Right. With that being said, I would like to thank all the three guests that we have with us today, Dr. Satya, Dr. Sarana, Dipen. Thank you very much, and hopefully we can get you back in the future to talk more about AI. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today as well.
Thank you.
All right, the last bit is that we have networking event after this. So if you still have more questions to talk to two of our speakers, I guess, feel free to catch them and ask them your questions. We have food in the pantry. We have drinks in the pantry. And thank you to all of you for joining us today. And hopefully we'll see you again in the future. Thank you. Oh, wait. We have souvenir for the speakers. Dr. Satya is gone, but he's not here offline anyway. Dipen.